Officer Bolt, confident in court against a black woman, until she reveals her role in a powerful U.S. organization. Picture a bustling courtroom on a scorching summer afternoon. A steely-eyed cop sits smugly behind the prosecutor's table, convinced that he's about to notch another easy victory. Across the aisle, a poised black woman, her elegant posture betraying neither fear nor outrage, awaits the proceedings that could forever alter her life. Spectators have packed the gallery to witness this legal clash. Some mutter in disapproval, while others clutch silent hopes for justice. Little do they know that beneath the surface of everyday courtroom formalities lies a harrowing story of betrayal, hidden identities, and shocking truths. By the time the final gavel falls, no one present will remain unchanged. Detective Kyle Bradshaw had witnessed countless arrests during his 10 years with the Springfield Police Department, but tonight felt different. It wasn't because of the circumstance or the neighborhood. He'd made plenty of arrests in the rundown, dimly lit blocks of Maplewood. No, tonight was different because Kyle believed this was the kind of collar that could catapult his career to the next level. He had big ambitions, aiming for the status of captain, or maybe even a future run for public office. Arresting an alleged suspect in a violent confrontation would bolster his fearless reputation. The swirling red and blue lights illuminated the cracked asphalt. Nearby street lamps flickered intermittently, casting erratic shadows across the scene. 2 patrol cars formed a shaky blockade, while half a dozen onlookers craned their necks from behind battered fences and grimy windows. The rumor mill would surely spin into action by morning. Kyle didn't care. He had a job to do. His partner, Officer Fiona Knight, stood a few steps behind, eyes flicking over every detail. The bullet casings scattered on the ground, the shattered car window, and the battered sedan parked at a crooked angle. Inside that sedan was Ivory Lucas, mid-30s, with delicate features and a composure that struck Kyle as eerie for someone who had just been found at the scene of an altercation. She sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting as though anticipating an announcement that would command her next move. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Kyle said, inching closer, gun drawn but not pointed. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to taste. Ivory complied, her face betraying no panic. "You've made a mistake," she said, voice calm, almost too calm. Kyle didn't like that. A typical suspect would be shouting denials, crying, or cowering in fear. Her stillness, her unwavering gaze, made him uneasy. He nodded at Fiona, who holstered her own weapon and moved to open the driver's side door. Ivory offered no resistance as Fiona pulled her out of the vehicle and pressed her hands behind her back. "We got a call about shots fired," Kyle announced. "Your car matches the description." Ivory turned her head slightly, enough to let Kyle catch the glint of determination in her eyes. "I didn't fire any shots." Kyle exhaled sharply. He'd heard every excuse in the book: mistaken identity, self-defense, outright denial. "Is that so?" "Witness says otherwise." Ivory's silence in response only fueled Kyle's confidence. He motioned to Fiona to finish cuffing Ivory. This quiet suspect was going to make things easy for him. She had no weapon on her, but the shell casings and the bullet hole in the side of her car told a story. Perhaps Ivory had tossed the gun or handed it off to someone else. In Kyle's mind, her guilt was certain. As Ivory was guided to the patrol car, the onlookers hovered. Some held phones, recording or taking pictures. An older woman shouted, "Let her go, she ain't done nothing." But Kyle ignored them all. The only thing that mattered was collecting enough evidence to ensure Ivory would be booked. That was the next step. When Ivory was finally seated in the back of the cruiser, Kyle stepped aside to talk to Fiona. She recounted that the anonymous 911 call described a woman in a dark sedan exchanging fire with someone near a convenience store. Ivory Lucas's black sedan had been the only one in the vicinity. "This is almost too neat," Fiona muttered, tapping her foot. "We don't even have a victim, do we?" Kyle sighed. "No body, no injured party. Maybe the other person fled. This area is no stranger to gang violence. She could have been in a shootout." "Could be," Fiona said, her tone edged with skepticism. "But we have no weapon." Kyle shrugged. "She looks guilty enough, and we'll figure out the details once we get her to the station." A part of him, the seasoned detective, knew that any number of explanations could exist for Ivory's presence. Yet the larger, more ambitious part of him chose to see Ivory Lucas as exactly who he needed her to be. A criminal whose arrest would look good on his record. Sometimes it wasn't about the truth, it was about building your case. The night ended with Ivory in a holding cell, Kyle completing the official report, and a faint sense of triumph settling over him. He didn't realize that with each keystroke on the report, he was weaving a web that would eventually trap him. Ivory Lucas, calm, composed. Ivory Lucas wasn't the defenseless suspect he believed her to be. Kyle left the precinct in the early hours, his mind already spinning with the possibilities of how this case might advance his career, unaware that across town, behind steel bars, Ivory Lucas sat quietly, her thoughts arranged with military precision, planning her next move. Kyle woke the next day feeling an uncharacteristic bounce in his step. The early morning sunlight streaming through his bedroom window seemed to promise a bright future. He quickly dressed, donned his badge, and hurried out the door, ignoring the slight pang in his stomach that told him he was skipping breakfast. At the station, he found officers finishing their night shift, the tired lines on their faces a testament to another grueling night in Springfield. He headed straight for the records department, eager to see if Ivory Lucas had any prior charges. If she was a repeat offender, his case was even stronger. To his surprise, Ivory Lucas's file came up empty. No arrests, no misdemeanors, not even a parking ticket. She was squeaky clean. That unsettled him. Typically, people involved in shootouts had some record, even if it was tangential. Maybe Ivory was an exception, or maybe she was adept at staying invisible. While he waited for an update from forensics about the bullet casings found at the scene, Kyle decided to check Ivory's place of employment. After some cross-referencing, he discovered that Ivory Lucas worked at a local philanthropic organization downtown. The name, the Unity Foundation, was well known for raising scholarships and grants for underprivileged kids. The director, Sarah Gable, was something of a saint in the community. Ivory's position was listed as program coordinator. Kyle scoffed at his screen. A philanthropic do-gooder involved in a shootout? Something wasn't adding up. He considered that Ivory might be living a double life. Charity worker by day, gunslinging accomplice by night. Wouldn't be the first time someone wore a mask for society. Determined to find more, Kyle scrolled through Ivory's personal data. She rented a modest apartment in a decent area, no record of a spouse or children, no upcoming court cases or civil suits. She had a stable bank account, the transactions primarily related to her job. Nothing screamed criminal. His phone buzzed. Bradshaw, he answered. It was forensics. The bullet casings matched a .38 revolver, but that was hardly shocking. Guns of that caliber flooded the streets. They also found Ivory's fingerprints on her sedan's trunk, obviously, but no prints on any firearms or bullet casings. With no direct evidence tying Ivory to a weapon, the prosecution might find it difficult to secure a conviction. Kyle gritted his teeth. His strong sense of certainty from the night before was beginning to crack around the edges. He still believed Ivory was involved. There had to be some reason she was there, but the facts weren't lining up as nicely as hoped. He decided to pay Ivory a visit in the holding cell. Maybe a face-to-face interrogation would crack her veneer. Entering the dimly lit area of the precinct where the cells were, Kyle passed the rows of locked doors until he reached Ivory. She was seated on the small cot, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked up, and for a fleeting moment, Kyle imagined he saw pity in her eyes, pity for him. He squared his shoulders. So, Ivory Lucas, he began, testing out the name. You're a program coordinator at a charity and have no criminal record. Want to explain what you were doing in a shootout? She raised an eyebrow. I already told you. I wasn't involved in any shootout. Kyle waited for more, but she remained silent. We found you at the scene. Witnesses claim you were there when shots were fired. A single witness, Ivory corrected, who called anonymously. Are you sure there was even a second shooter? Her tone was composed, even curious, as if she were speaking to a colleague rather than the detective trying to build a case against her. Kyle couldn't help but feel like the balance of power was off. Typically, detainees pleaded for mercy, asked for attorneys, or spouted defensive ramblings. Ivory wasn't doing any of that. She was simply stating observations. He shrugged. We have enough to hold you for now. She met his gaze. I'm sure you do, but that doesn't make me guilty. Kyle tried to maintain his authoritative stance, but Ivory's calm demeanor was unnerving. He found himself rattled, though he wouldn't show it. If there's something you want to tell me, I'm listening. She paused, then offered a cryptic smile. Detective, you have a job to do, and I respect that. But I promise you, this is all a misunderstanding. one that's going to come to light very soon. His irritation flared. Your best bet is to cooperate. Otherwise, charges will be filed. She nodded, as though considering the statement, but said nothing further. Kyle left the cell feeling a swirl of emotions. Ivory Lucas was either the best liar he had ever encountered, or she truly was innocent. Yet, if she were innocent, why wasn't she more desperate to prove her innocence? Why didn't she volunteer an alibi or name a suspect? The seeds of doubt were planted, but Kyle pushed them away. He had a gut instinct that Ivory was involved in something bigger. He would remain confident, keep building the case, and let the courts do their work. After all, it was Ivory's life on the line, not his. Or so he believed. That afternoon, Ivory's attorney arrived at the precinct. Her name was Brenda Stone, a tall, imposing figure with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit. She wore a charcoal gray suit that demanded respect. Kyle had dealt with his share of defense attorneys, but Brenda exuded a presence that stood out. She wasted no time. I'm here to see my client, Ivory Lucas, Brenda announced to the desk sergeant. Within minutes, she was led to a private interrogation room where Ivory waited quietly. Kyle observed them through the one-way glass. He saw Brenda lean in, speak in hushed tones, and Ivory responding with calm sincerity. At one point, Ivory's eyes flicked up to meet Kyle's reflection in the glass. It was a fleeting glance, but it conveyed something akin to reassurance, as if she was telling Kyle she wasn't afraid. A few moments later, Brenda emerged, fixing Kyle with a stare that told him she was ready for a battle. Detective Bradshaw, correct? She said, extending a hand. He took it, though he immediately felt her grip was not for pleasantries. It was a statement of her resolve. That's right. I'd like to see the evidence you have against my client, Brenda demanded. I assume it's compelling enough for you to hold a respected community leader overnight. He bristled at her insinuation. We have witness testimony placing her at the scene of a shootout. We found bullet casings and a bullet hole in her car. Brenda nodded, unperturbed. And where's the weapon? Any eyewitnesses to her firing said weapon? Kyle tightened his jaw. We're working on that. She pursed her lips. I see. While you're working on that, I'd like Ivory released on bail. Kyle shook his head. She's a flight risk. Brenda's eyebrows shot up. A flight risk? My client has no record, a full-time job with the Unity Foundation, and roots in this city. I'd love to hear your rationale. Before Kyle could respond, the door behind them opened, revealing Assistant District Attorney Ethan Thorne. He was a middle-aged, slick-suited man known for his zero-tolerance approach. Bradshaw, I'm taking over from here. Kyle stepped aside, letting Ethan and Brenda talk. Their exchange was a volley of legal jargon, each citing statutes and case precedents. Eventually, Ethan announced that while Ivory would remain in custody a bit longer, they'd consider the bail request after an initial hearing. He had to review the evidence thoroughly before deciding. As Brenda walked away, she cast a look that said this isn't over. Kyle felt a pang of irritation. He hated how defense attorneys always seemed so certain of their client's innocence, but Ivory's composure and Brenda's steely resolve were unsettling. He buried his doubts, telling himself again that everything would soon fall into place. After the lawyer's visit, Ivory was returned to her cell, with no sign of panic or distress. Kyle checked the day's schedule and saw that Ivory's bail hearing was set for the next day. He hoped new evidence would surface before then, evidence to confirm his suspicion that Ivory was more involved than she let on. Later, Kyle found himself sitting at his cluttered desk, scanning over the initial police report once more. He couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was missing. The anonymous caller's words echoed in his mind. Shots fired, black sedan, woman at the scene. He wondered who that caller was. Usually, at least in Maplewood, anonymous calls came from people too scared to be identified, often worried about retaliation from gangs. Yet there was something about this particular call, no mention of Ivory's appearance beyond her gender, no mention of other vehicles leaving the scene, and no willingness to provide further details. Kyle jotted a note to himself to look deeper into that call. In major cases, investigating the source of a 911 tip was standard, but in a routine violent crime, it sometimes got pushed to the bottom of the to-do list. This was no longer a routine case, if it ever was. His phone buzzed, a text from his partner, Fiona. We've got a lead on the store security footage. Meet you in the squad room. Kyle got up and headed there, weaving through the maze of desks. The squad room was abuzz with the daily hum of activity, phones ringing, typed reports, suspects being led in for questioning. He spotted Fiona at a computer, queuing up video footage from the convenience store near the crime scene. She motioned him over. "All right, let's see what we have." They watched the footage. The camera showed the store's entrance, the gas pumps, and part of the street. The timestamp matched the approximate time of the shooting. Then, a black sedan came into view, Ivory's sedan. Ivory emerged from the driver's seat, walked toward the store entrance, but halfway there, she paused and looked down the street. Her posture suggested alarm or concern. Moments later, the camera view shook slightly, possibly from the report of gunshots off-screen. Ivory immediately retreated back to her car. Kyle leaned in. "So, she hears shots and gets back in her car." Fiona nodded. "That's what it looks like. She doesn't seem to be firing anything." The video continued. Ivory hurried to her car's driver's side door, ducking at one point as if bullets were whizzing by. Another sedan, a silver one, briefly appeared on the edge of the frame, then vanished. The footage ended without capturing any actual shooters. Kyle exhaled. This doesn't prove she fired shots. Could the bullet hole in her car be from stray gunfire? Fiona shrugged. It's possible. In fact, from this angle, she looks like she's trying to avoid getting shot, not returning fire. Confusion simmered in Kyle's mind. The evidence seemed to suggest Ivory might be innocent, and yet, they had an anonymous witness claiming otherwise. Why would someone point the finger at Ivory Lucas? Could it be a setup? Fiona asked, echoing Kyle's silent question. He rubbed his temples. "I don't know, but we need more. Let's see if we can track down that silver sedan, or if the store's interior cameras picked up anything else." Deep down, Kyle's certainty was crumbling. He hated the idea that he might have arrested an innocent woman. A mistake like that could ruin a life and a career. But he still held on to the hope that Ivory was hiding something. Her calmness in the face of arrest, the cryptic statements. There had to be more to her story. Stepping away from the screen, Kyle told Fiona to retrieve more footage if possible. He also planned to revisit the site of the shooting, maybe speak to residents who might have seen something. If Ivory was indeed innocent, then who was behind framing her? And if she was guilty, how far did her connections go? The next morning, Ivory appeared in court for her bail hearing. Kyle sat a few rows behind the prosecution, arms folded, scanning the crowd. He spotted Ivory, head held high, flanked by Brenda Stone. A mixture of onlookers filled the wooden benches. Curious neighbors, Ivory's co-workers from the Unity Foundation, even a few local journalists who sniffed a potentially big story. Judge Susan Connor, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, took the bench with a firm rap of the gavel. She called the session to order. Assistant District Attorney Ethan Thorne rose to present the state's case. Ivory Lucas was found at the scene of a shootout. Bullet casings matched a .38 revolver. An anonymous witness identified her as the shooter, and she posed a flight risk. Brenda countered that there was no direct evidence tying Ivory to a firearm. Ivory had no prior criminal record, and the store's security footage suggested Ivory was fleeing from gunfire rather than participating in it. She also pointed out Ivory's stable employment, community ties, and willingness to cooperate. Judge Connor reviewed the arguments. Her gaze drifted momentarily to Ivory, who met her eyes with unwavering composure. Finally, the judge spoke. "Given the evidence at this stage, I see insufficient proof that Miss Lucas fired any weapon. Additionally, she appears to be a long-standing member of this community with strong ties. Bail is set at $10,000. Ivory closed her eyes in relief, while Brenda offered a small nod of gratitude to the judge. Ethan looked displeased, but he couldn't argue. Kyle watched as Ivory stepped from the defendant's table, her chin still lifted, and was let out by a court officer to finalize her release. Though Kyle felt an odd sense of relief that Ivory wouldn't be locked away if she was innocent, he also felt the sting of humiliation. The case he'd championed was quickly dissolving. He walked outside the courthouse, slipping on sunglasses against the mid-morning glare. He needed to think. Standing under the courthouse's massive columns, Kyle lit a cigarette, an old habit that flared up during stressful times. He noticed Ivory and Brenda exiting the building. They spoke briefly, then Ivory turned in his direction. For a moment, they locked eyes. She gave him a polite nod, neither triumphant nor resentful, then moved on. The image lingered with Kyle for several minutes. He realized Ivory wasn't just calm, she was prepared. That kind of composure wasn't common among the general population, let alone those who had faced a night in jail. Kyle decided he needed to dig deeper, beyond her place of work and that spotless record. Ivory had layers he hadn't uncovered yet. Returning to the station, he called an old friend, Simon West, who worked with the local FBI office. Simon picked up on the second ring. "Bradshaw, long time, what's up?" Kyle didn't delve into details yet. "Need you to run a deeper background check on someone. Ivory Lucas. Lives in Springfield, works for the Unity Foundation." Simon's tone turned serious. "Is she a suspect? Potentially. Or maybe she's a victim. I'm not sure yet. I just need to know if anything is off the record or sealed." Simon agreed to dig around and let Kyle know what he found. The call ended. Kyle felt a flicker of guilt for using an FBI contact to investigate Ivory in ways that might be outside standard police procedures. But the more he learned about Ivory, the more crucial it seemed to find out who she really was. Ivory's release sent ripples through the community. Some championed her as a victim of racial profiling by an overzealous cop. Others whispered conspiracies, claiming Ivory was part of a powerful organization that pulled strings behind the scenes. Social media lit up with hashtags of Free Ivory, while the local news aired interviews of Maplewood residents who questioned the police department's actions. 3 days after her bail hearing, Ivory sat at a quiet picnic table in Willow Park. The late afternoon sun shimmered through oak trees, creating dancing patterns on the grass. She brushed away stray leaves on the table, then checked her phone. A text message from her boss, Sarah Gable, read, "Please keep me updated. We're all behind you." Ivory smiled at the vote of support. A moment later, a woman in a modest black blazer approached. She was in her late 40s, her hair styled in neat waves. Ivory greeted her warmly. "Hello, Detective Grant." The woman offered a friendly nod. "Ivory, you're looking well, all things considered." They sat. Detective Piper Grant wasn't just any detective. She was part of an internal investigations unit within the FBI, dedicated to rooting out corruption that could slip under local law enforcement's radar. Ivory's role, though mostly unknown even to her own colleagues at the Unity Foundation, involved assisting such specialized teams. But that secret was carefully guarded. "So," Detective Grant began, "I heard about your run-in with Springfield PD." Ivory sighed, tucking a lock of hair behind her ear. "Yes, it was unexpected. Someone deliberately called the police to incriminate me. We need to find out who." "That's exactly why I'm here," Grant replied, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "We suspect that your undercover work might be compromised." Undercover. That single word carried so much weight. For the past year, Ivory had been subtly assisting the FBI in investigating ties between local gangs and corrupt officials. Through her philanthropic work, she'd gained the trust of communities often overlooked by the system. She'd passed along tips, helped locate missing individuals, and guided the FBI in identifying potential dirty cops, though she rarely knew their names. Grant cleared her throat. "We have reason to believe that Detective Kyle Bradshaw isn't crooked. He's just overzealous. But there's someone else within the police department who might be on a gang's payroll. They could have orchestrated the false witness call." Ivory's eyes hardened. "I had no choice but to keep quiet about my real role. If I admitted I work with the FBI, it could blow the entire operation." Grant nodded. "Yes, and you did the right thing, but we need to figure out who set you up and why. Meanwhile, we'll do our best to shield you, but be cautious. If they learn you're connected to us, you'll be in danger." Ivory's heart quickened. Detective Bradshaw is determined to make me a scapegoat. I see his doubt, but he's also ambitious. He wants a big win. Grant tapped her pen on the table thoughtfully. "Keep up your calm front. The less he suspects you have powerful allies, the more he'll slip up around you. If we can find out who's pulling the strings at the PD, we can exonerate you publicly and also dismantle the network behind your frame-up." Ivory breathed in the cool park air, feeling both relief and mounting pressure. Understood. They discussed a plan. Ivory would continue her normal routine, allow the legal process to unfold, and discreetly relay any suspicious activity or contact to Grant. The FBI would quietly investigate. Officially, Ivory Lucas was just another defendant waiting for trial. Off the record, she was a key asset in a widening corruption probe. As they parted ways, Ivory's resolve deepened. She couldn't let fear or anger cloud her judgment. An entire community depended on her philanthropic programs, but now she realized her role was even bigger than she'd initially believed. If she played her cards right, she wouldn't just clear her name. She'd expose the corrupt figures who had turned her life upside down. Walking away from the park, Ivory felt the weight of her hidden identity pressing on her shoulders. She glanced at the courthouse in the distance, a foreboding silhouette against the sky. Trial day was approaching, and with it, the threat of her secret coming to light. One thing was certain. If Detective Kyle Bradshaw thought he had her cornered, he was in for a shocking revelation. Detective Kyle Bradshaw was not a man accustomed to feeling cornered, but as the days wore on, the pieces of the Ivory Lucas puzzle refused to fit neatly into place. The security footage, the lack of a weapon, and Ivory's composure all pointed toward her innocence, yet his gut nagged at him. There had to be more. One evening, Kyle sat at his kitchen table with an open laptop, reviewing the case files. An untouched plate of reheated leftovers grew cold beside him. He glanced at his phone for the 10th time, hoping for a message from his FBI contact, Simon West. So far, Simon hadn't returned his calls. Suddenly, the phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You're barking up the wrong tree." He frowned. Spam or a threat? He typed back, "Who is this?" No reply came. A chill crept through him. Someone was paying attention to his investigation. The next day at the precinct, Kyle approached the call log department to ask about tracing the 911 tip that led to Ivory's arrest. The clerk, an older man with a receding hairline, apologetically explained that the call came from a burner phone, a dead end. Frustrated, Kyle was heading back to his desk when his phone finally buzzed with a call from Simon. "Bradshaw, you asked me to look into Ivory Lucas," Simon said in a hushed tone. "Yes, thanks for getting back to me. Find anything?" Simon hesitated. "Well, she's got a file that's sealed at the federal level. I can't access it, and my superiors told me to drop the inquiry." Kyle's grip on the phone tightened. "Drop it? What?" "They wouldn't say. Just that Ivory Lucas is off limits. You didn't hear this from me, Bradshaw, but I'm warning you. Someone high up wants her protected." The line went dead. Kyle stood in the hallway, phone in hand, mind racing. Ivory had a sealed federal file, high-level protection? This changed everything. If Ivory was truly innocent, then maybe the case was bigger than a simple shooting. And if Ivory was part of something larger, his role in arresting her could have massive consequences for him and the department. That evening, Kyle visited Ivory's apartment building. Officially, he was there to see if any neighbors had witnessed suspicious activity the night of her arrest. Unofficially, he wanted to see Ivory in her own environment, perhaps glean some insight into who she really was. He knocked on her door. Several seconds passed before the door opened, revealing Ivory in a simple blouse and jeans. She looked surprised to see him. "Detective Bradshaw," she greeted. "Are you here on official business?" He cleared his throat. "I'm following up on your case. I thought I'd see if you or your neighbors recall any details about that night." Ivory stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was cozy, tastefully decorated with modern art prints. Bookshelves filled with everything from classic literature to political biographies. A few framed photographs of Ivory with smiling children at community events adorned the walls. "No new details," she said, motioning for him to sit on a small sofa. "I've told you everything I know." Kyle glanced around, noting the tidiness and the sense of stability. "Mind if I ask a personal question?" Ivory's posture tensed, but she remained polite. "Go ahead. Why are you so calm about all this?" Most people falsely accused of a crime would be panicking. She studied him, and for a moment, Kyle saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Detective, not everyone wears their emotions the same way. I'm concerned, believe me, but I also know the truth will come out, if the system works as it should." Kyle nodded, pressing forward. "Are you sure there's nothing else you want to tell me? If someone set you up, if there's more to your story, it might help." Her jaw tightened, and she chose her words carefully. "Let me ask you something, Detective. If I told you I had resources that prove my innocence, would you believe me, or would you see it as an excuse?" He hesitated. "I want the truth, Miss Lucas, whether it confirms or denies my assumptions." Behind the scenes, Detective Piper Grant and her FBI colleagues were making progress. Late one evening, they trailed a suspicious car connected to a known gang leader, Marco Gomez, who had been expanding his territory in Springfield. The car belonged to a low-level police officer named Sean Major, assigned to the same precinct as Kyle Bradshaw. Major had a reputation for skirting departmental rules, small infractions, petty misconduct, but nothing that had ever stuck. Grant's sources hinted that Major was the one funneling crucial police intel to Gomez's gang. If Ivory's philanthropic work had uncovered these criminal ties, it would make sense for the gang to frame her, effectively discrediting her as a reliable informant. After discreet surveillance, Grant discovered a clandestine meeting between Major and one of Gomez's henchmen. Money exchanged hands, and an envelope changed possession. Grant snapped photos from her unmarked vehicle, heart pounding. She couldn't move yet. She needed more evidence. Meanwhile, Ivory, oblivious to these new developments, focused on preparing for her upcoming court date. She maintained her daily routine, working at the Unity Foundation, meeting with her legal counsel, checking in with Detective Grant when safe. One afternoon, Ivory was reviewing scholarship applications at the Foundation's cozy conference room. Her boss, Sarah Gable, entered with a compassionate smile. "Ivory, how are you holding up?" Ivory rubbed her temples. "I'm okay, Sarah. Just ready for the truth to come out." Sarah patted her shoulder. "We have a big fundraiser next week. You've always been the heart of these events. If you're up to it, I'd love for you to handle the planning." A year ago, Ivory would have leapt at the opportunity, but now her mind was 1,000 miles away, entangled in legal drama and hidden conspiracies. Still, she nodded. Of course, the show must go on. She needed to appear as normal as possible. Any deviation from her routine might alert those responsible for setting her up. The best disguise was to act the way she always had, hardworking, optimistic, and dedicated to the community. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, Kyle received a sealed envelope at his desk. No return address. Inside, he found a single photograph, Ivory leaving a meeting room at a known FBI field office. No date, no context. Beneath the photo was a typed note. "Are you sure she's innocent?" Kyle's pulse raced. This confirmed Ivory had ties to the federal government. Why was the note sender trying to nudge Kyle back into doubting her? Could Ivory be playing both sides? Or was someone trying to stoke his suspicions to keep him off the real trail? He marched straight to his captain's office, brandishing the photo. Captain Helen Muller frowned deeply. "Where did you get this?" "Delivered to my desk." "No return address," Kyle replied, frustration burning in his eyes. Muller examined the photo. It could be doctored, but if not, Ivory Lucas might be more than she seems. Kyle felt a pang of guilt, remembering how Ivory had declared her innocence so calmly. "Captain, maybe she's working with the FBI. That could mean she's trying to expose something or someone in our department." Muller's gaze sharpened. "Like corruption?" Kyle nodded slowly. "Yes, possibly." Muller stood, crossing to the window that overlooked the busy street. "This is a risky path, Detective. If Ivory is working undercover, we have bigger problems than a simple shooting." Kyle gritted his teeth. "I want to do what's right, Captain. Then tread carefully. If we expose Ivory's possible role prematurely, we could compromise her and any federal operation. Meanwhile, we need to find out who sent this photo." Kyle left the office with a swirling mix of questions and a newfound sense of responsibility. If Ivory was indeed an undercover operative, he owed it to himself and to justice to protect her. But he also had to figure out who within the department might be trying to sabotage her and manipulate him in the process. The day of Ivory's preliminary hearing arrived under gray skies and a steady drizzle. The courthouse steps glistened with rainwater. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Journalists shuffled about, adjusting cameras, and concerned citizens filled the gallery seats. Ivory sat at the defense table, Brenda at her side. On the prosecution side was ADA Ethan, flipping through papers. Detective Kyle Bradshaw was seated behind him, tugging at his collar. He had prepared a testimony about the night of the arrest, but the new doubts clouded his mind. Should he present the facts as he initially understood them, or share his suspicions that Ivory might be a federal asset? When the judge entered, everyone rose. The hearing began. Ethan summarized the state's case. Ivory was at the scene of a crime. Bullet casings matched a .38 revolver typically used in gang-related shootings, and an anonymous caller identified her as the shooter. Brenda responded with a calm but firm rebuttal. Ivory was a community leader with no criminal record. The store's footage showed she likely fled from gunfire rather than initiated it, and the state had not produced any credible witness to testify against Ivory. Finally, Kyle was called to the stand. He recounted his arrival on the scene, the shell casings, and Ivory's arrest. Brenda then cross-examined him. "Detective Bradshaw, did you personally witness Miss Lucas firing a weapon?" she asked. Kyle shook his head, throat tight. "No, she was seated in her vehicle when I found her." "Did you recover a weapon from Miss Lucas or her car?" "No," he admitted. "And can you confirm that the bullet hole in her car could have been from stray gunfire?" Kyle paused, glancing at Ivory. Yes, that's a possibility. Brenda pressed on. Have you discovered any motive for Miss Lucas to fire a weapon at anyone that night? Kyle hesitated. Not definitively, no. Brenda allowed a moment's silence for the weight of his testimony to sink in. Thank you, detective, she said, stepping away. Ethan didn't look pleased. He recognized the holes in the state's case, but he forged ahead, calling on a forensics analyst who stated that the gunfire likely originated near Ivory's car, though he couldn't confirm Ivory had fired the shots. By midday, the hearing concluded. The judge informed the court that she would review the evidence and decide whether there was enough probable cause for a trial. With that, the session ended, and Ivory was free to go, for the time being. True to predictions, the judge dismissed Ivory's case due to insufficient evidence. The media covered it briefly, then moved on. But beneath the surface, tensions in Springfield were far from resolved. Ivory returned to her normal life, or at least the semblance of it, while Kyle dug into the suspicious elements surrounding her arrest. One afternoon, Ivory organized the upcoming fundraiser at the Unity Foundation. Banners were strung up in the courtyard, volunteers arranged tables with silent auction items, and local caterers set up a small buffet. Ivory supervised quietly, occasionally lost in thought about the real threat lurking in the shadows. Shortly before the event began, Ivory's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered tentatively. Hello. A raspy voice spoke. Thought you got away scot-free? You won't be so lucky next time. The line clicked dead. Ivory swallowed, heart pounding. She immediately texted Detective Grant. Just got a threat from a burner number. Grant replied, stay calm. We have a team nearby. For Ivory, it was a stark reminder that she wasn't safe, even with the charges dropped. Someone still wanted her out of the picture. Meanwhile, across town, Kyle zeroed in on Officer Major. Through quiet inquiries, he learned that Major frequented bars associated with Marco Gomez's gang. Kyle also spoke to a confidential informant who hinted that Major was paid to feed the gang inside information, like upcoming raids or vulnerable drug routes. It wouldn't be far-fetched for Major to orchestrate Ivory's arrest if she threatened the gang's interests. One evening, Kyle followed Major to a dingy sports bar near the city limits. The flicker of neon signs in the window revealed silhouettes inside. Kyle parked a safe distance away and watched from the darkness. Major emerged an hour later, chatting with a large, tattooed man who Kyle recognized from police mug shots as Gomez's lieutenant. The handshake, the slip of an envelope, it was all the confirmation Kyle needed. Kyle snapped photos, adrenaline pumping. He knew this was just a piece of the puzzle, but it was a crucial one. If Ivory's philanthropic work exposed something about Gomez's network, Major might have set her up to protect his own secrets. As Ivory was whisked away to greet the mayor, Kyle felt a surge of admiration for her resilience. She had endured injustice with poise, determined to keep helping her community. Standing alone in the lively courtyard, Kyle realized that his role had shifted. He wasn't just the arresting officer trying to prove Ivory's guilt. He was now an ally in her quest for justice. But as the evening's festivities continued, neither of them sensed that the final act of betrayal was about to unfold, exposing the deepest layers of corruption and leading to a karmic reckoning none could have anticipated. The fundraiser was in full swing. Soft jazz music floated in the background, mingling with laughter and the clink of glasses. Donors browsed silent auction items, everything from local art to weekend getaways. The crowd included community leaders, business owners, even some local celebrities who had come to support the Unity Foundation's mission. Ivory circulated through the room, greeting guests and thanking them for their generosity. In between conversations, she caught glimpses of Kyle, who lingered near the edges of the event, carefully observing. She also spotted Sarah Gable chatting animatedly with the mayor. All seemed to be going smoothly, until Ivory noticed a commotion near the entrance. A large man in a dark hoodie had slipped past the check-in table, weaving through guests with urgency. Something about his demeanor, tense, scanning the crowd, sent alarm bells ringing in Ivory's mind. She recognized him as one of Marco Gomez's known associates, a man she had seen in a photo from her FBI briefing. Quietly, Ivory maneuvered through the throng, approaching Kyle. "We've got trouble," she murmured, tilting her head discreetly toward the intruder. Kyle's eyes followed her signal. His hand instinctively moved toward his concealed weapon, though he didn't draw it yet. "I see him. Let's keep calm. We don't want to scare the guests." The man spotted Ivory and began to stride purposefully toward her, a dark glint in his eyes. She felt her pulse spike. Kyle stepped forward, blocking the man's path. "Sir, do you have an invitation?" Kyle asked, trying to keep his tone polite but firm. The man sneered, pushing Kyle aside with surprising force. "I'm here for the lady." Guests began to murmur, confusion rippling through the once festive atmosphere. Ivory stood her ground, desperately hoping not to incite a panic. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice calm but resolute. He flashed a menacing grin. "Got a message for you, Ivory Lucas. You're meddling in business that doesn't concern you." The tension snapped like a coiled spring. Before anyone could react, the man reached inside his hoodie. Kyle lunged, grabbing for the man's wrist. A brief struggle ensued. In the chaos, a gunshot echoed, sending shrieks through the crowd. People dove for cover, tables overturned, glass shattered. When the shot rang out, Ivory instinctively ducked, her heart pounding. She heard Kyle shout, "Gun! Everybody down!" Another shot fired, ricocheting off a nearby column. Fear surged as Ivory realized the intruder was desperately trying to get a clear shot at her. A split second later, Kyle pinned the intruder's hand. With a swift maneuver, Kyle disarmed him, the gun clattering to the floor. Security guards rushed in, subduing the assailant and dragging him outside, where the police had begun to arrive, alerted by frantic 911 calls. Panting, Kyle scanned the crowd for Ivory. He found her crouched behind a table, trembling. "Ivory!" He ran to her, helping her stand. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, voice shaky. "No, I'm fine thanks to you." Sarah Gable rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Ivory, oh my God, are you okay?" Ivory hugged Sarah, ensuring her friend she wasn't injured. Within minutes, the fundraiser turned into a crime scene. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the building's exterior. Officers cordoned off the area, took statements, and escorted shocked guests outside. The once celebratory courtyard was strewn with broken dishes, scattered tablecloths, and shattered glasses. Detective Piper Grant arrived, blending in with local law enforcement. She locked eyes with Ivory, a silent question hanging in the air. Ivory nodded, indicating she was all right. Grant then approached Kyle, who was giving a statement to a patrol officer. "Detective Bradshaw," Grant said, showing her FBI credentials discreetly. "I'm Detective Piper Grant, with a joint task force. Thank you for intervening tonight." Kyle recognized her name from Ivory's subtle hints. "Glad I could help, but who is that guy?" Grant glanced toward the patrol car where the intruder was being detained. "A foot soldier for Marco Gomez. Looks like they wanted to silence Miss Lucas once and for all." Kyle swallowed. They must have known their plan to frame her failed. Grant nodded grimly. "Yes, we've been tracking them for a while. Ivory was helping us gather intel through her community work. Gomez's gang, and certain corrupt officers, see her as a threat." Kyle's eyes flickered with realization. "So Ivory really is working with the feds?" Grant confirmed it with a curt nod. "She's been an asset for over a year." As the night wore on, the fundraiser site transformed into a fully active police scene. Ivory provided a statement to Detective Grant, carefully omitting direct references to her deeper FBI connection in the official record. Kyle hovered nearby, occasionally locking eyes with Ivory in silent support. Though shaken, Ivory's resolve remained intact. One thing was certain. The circle of corruption was about to be exposed. Major's betrayal, Gomez's violent tactics, everything was converging. Kyle realized this was more than just a personal redemption. It was the right thing to do. And for Ivory, it was the start of clearing her name in a far more public and definitive manner than any court hearing could achieve. 2 days later, before sunrise, law enforcement mobilized across the city. The FBI, Springfield PD's Internal Affairs Unit, and select trusted officers, Kyle among them, executed simultaneous raids to bring down Marco Gomez's gang and any corrupt officials within the police department. The operation had been planned swiftly but meticulously, thanks to the evidence Ivory and Detective Grant had painstakingly gathered. Officer Major was the first to go. He was pulled from his squad car at the start of his shift, stunned to see Kyle standing among the arresting officers. Major spat curses, denying everything, until confronted with photographic proof of his meetings with Gomez's men. He was cuffed and taken into custody, face contorted in rage. Simultaneously, FBI teams moved on Gomez's known hideouts. Ramshackle houses in Maplewood served as stash points for drugs and firearms. SWAT teams breached doors, flashbang grenades illuminating the early morning gloom. Gomez's henchmen scrambled, but the element of surprise and superior numbers overwhelmed them. Gunfire erupted in pockets of resistance, but the assault was swift and decisive. Detective Kyle joined the unit that descended upon Gomez's main compound, a fortified warehouse near the outskirts of the city. After a tense standoff, tear gas forced the remaining gang members to surrender. Marco Gomez himself was found barricaded in an office, armed to the teeth. Nonetheless, he was taken alive after a brief shootout. By mid-morning, the city streets were filled with police vehicles, FBI vans, and media trucks, each capturing the dramatic culmination of the raid. Social media exploded with news updates, while anxious citizens peered from windows or turned on their TVs, learning that a major criminal network had been dismantled overnight. Inside the warehouse, Kyle took a moment to catch his breath amid the swirling dust. He spotted Detective Grant directing agents to secure evidence. Gomez was led out in handcuffs, his expression a mix of fury and defeat. "Nice work, Detective," Grant said, offering Kyle a rare grin. "We've been chasing this syndicate for years. Thanks to Ivory's inside information and your willingness to follow the truth, we got them." Kyle exhaled, the weight of relief washing over him. "How's Ivory? Is she safe?" Grant nodded. "She's at a secure location. This was dangerous for her, so we kept her off-site." Kyle felt a pang of worry, but also gratitude that Ivory hadn't been placed in the line of fire. "I want to see her, make sure she's all right." In due time, Grant replied with a smile. "She'll be meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office to finalize her statement. The Department of Justice wants to ensure all her work remains classified until the right moment." Kyle understood. Ivory's covert role could continue to serve as a template for future investigations, so they needed to protect her identity from public disclosure. Still, he found himself eager to talk to her, to confirm that this nightmare was truly over. News of Officer Major's arrest rocked the Springfield Police Department. Headlines screamed corruption, while citizens demanded accountability. A press conference was hastily arranged, where Captain Mueller and other top officials pledged internal reforms and promised to rebuild community trust. For Kyle, the fallout was both a relief and a burden. He had played a part, albeit unwittingly, in Ivory's arrest. Now he was recognized for helping expose Major and Gomez, but the experience left him humbled. He realized how easily personal ambition could cloud one's judgment. Meanwhile, Ivory met with federal prosecutors in a discreet office, finalizing her statements about Gomez's gang and the corrupt network that had tried to silence her. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, a name recognized nationwide, was keen to use Ivory's case as a powerful example of community-led investigations that could uncover deep-seated corruption. After signing a stack of documents and ensuring her testimony was securely recorded, Ivory found herself alone in a conference room, waiting for Detective Grant to wrap up final details. She stared at her reflection in the window, thinking back on the whirlwind of the last few weeks. The night of her arrest, the time spent in a holding cell, the bail hearing, the shooting at the fundraiser. It felt surreal. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Detective Grant entered, smiling. "You did it, Ivory. Your information helped us connect all the dots. Major has confessed to some of the charges, likely trying to strike a deal. Gomez is facing a mountain of evidence." Ivory exhaled, relief mingling with sadness. "I'm glad it's over, but it costs so much, for me and for the community." Grant placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You saved countless lives by exposing this. Don't discount that." Ivory nodded, tears prickling her eyes. "I suppose so. I never wanted it to get this dangerous." Grant stepped aside, revealing someone standing behind her, Detective Kyle Bradshaw. He entered the room cautiously, as if unsure of his welcome. "Hello, Ivory," he said softly. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Detective," Grant, sensing the moment, excused herself. The room fell silent, tension crackling between Ivory and Kyle. Finally, Kyle cleared his throat. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began, meeting her gaze. "I let my ambition cloud my instincts. I should have seen the truth sooner." Ivory studied his face, seeing genuine remorse. "It's in the past now. We've both grown from this." He nodded, stepping closer. "I'll never forget how calm you were, even when you were arrested. I realize now it was because you believed in the bigger picture. You knew you had to protect your operation." Ivory shrugged lightly, emotion catching in her throat. "Protecting others was always my top priority." Kyle's voice softened. "And now, You're free, truly free. Your name's cleared. The city knows you're not the criminal I once thought you were. A flicker of relief passed across Ivory's face. Yes, but the trauma won't disappear overnight. They stood there, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. The once confident cop and the calm, collected black woman he had wrongly accused were now on equal footing. Ivory extended her hand. Friends? She asked tentatively, recognizing that they'd come a long way from that hostile night in Maplewood. Kyle grasped her hand warmly. Friends. Outside, in the hallway, Detective Grant spoke with an FBI colleague about the broader impact of Ivory's case. Inside, Ivory and Kyle found a measure of closure. The karmic scales had balanced. Major and Gomez were behind bars. Ivory was exonerated, and Kyle had faced his own complicity. Justice, if not perfect, felt tangible. In the weeks that followed, Officer Major's corruption case sent shockwaves through Springfield. Multiple gang affiliates testified that Major brokered deals for drug trafficking routes, provided police schedules, and orchestrated Ivory's frame-up. He tried to pin the blame on others, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge handed Major a hefty prison sentence, leaving him disgraced. Once a cocky officer, now just another criminal behind bars. Marco Gomez's trial was a spectacle. Witness after witness detailed the gang's reign of terror. He too was sentenced to a lengthy term in a maximum security facility. Hard karma, it seemed, had arrived in full force. Ivory resumed her role at the Unity Foundation, her dedication to community service stronger than ever. She helped expand programs for at-risk youth and advocated for greater transparency in local law enforcement. Though she remained circumspect about her undercover work, word of her courage spread. She became a figure of quiet inspiration, someone who faced adversity with grace and emerged unbroken. Detective Kyle Bradshaw, chastened but redeemed in the eyes of his peers, continued his police work with renewed clarity. His ambition now took a back seat to doing what was right, and he led new community outreach initiatives aimed at rebuilding trust. Occasionally, he collaborated with Ivory on community safety programs, forging an unlikely but powerful alliance. In the end, Ivory's ordeal proved that truth, once discovered, could dismantle even the most insidious corruption. The cop who once thought he had her cornered watched in awe as she stood strong, her identity revealed not as a criminal, but as a steadfast guardian of justice. And in a city that had teetered on the edge of despair, hope glimmered anew. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey of cop confident in court against black woman, until she reveals her role in a powerful U.S. organization. From the tense arrest under neon lights, to the explosive showdown in court, from hidden documents to a near-fatal showdown at a charity event, we witnessed how one woman's unwavering courage and a detective's change of heart exposed a web of corruption. This story reminds us that justice often demands more than one person. It requires a whole community willing to stand up for truth. If you found this story inspiring, dramatic, or simply entertaining, we'd love your support. Please hit that like button, share the video with friends who enjoy a compelling twist of crime and redemption, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales. Your engagement helps us continue bringing such stories to life. Thank you for watching.